Hey, how's it going? Welcome to tonight's live stream. I will disclose straight away that I am under the weather. I have a little bit of a cold. So currently I am drinking a hot toddy. There is whiskey in it, so that's one thing. Yeah, so tonight I've previously done a live. Not sure if you had seen that. Hopefully some of you have, but it was discussing the OSWAs. I had Jason on as a live guest, and we probably critiqued it a little hard, but I tend to do this with everything, as I was discussing with my guest earlier. I am generally a skeptic when first getting into things, and then slowly but surely warm to them. So tonight, hopefully, I will be thoroughly warmed to the idea of the OSWAs. And to help me along with that, we do have Roy. And Roy has kindly agreed to come on and answer some questions, discuss the OSWAs, and yeah, kind of answer any issues or questions I have on the OSWAs. Hopefully, we'll format it in a decent structure. Start with this year, start with the nominations, the setup of it, see um, if there was any surprises for Roy, if there's any surprises with some of the nominations, some of the winners, and then we'll maybe talk about the future of the Oscars and what he thinks it holds for the Oscars itself. So without further ado, I'll bring Roy in because I always say that I get nervous on these live streams, and I always do, and I don't know why. It doesn't matter what I'm doing or who I have on, it always happens. So we'll bring Roy on, and hopefully he'll take. Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Not bad yourself.
Well, I know. Actually, I know how you're doing because I asked, and I'm sorry to hear that you're poorly, buddy. I still get nervous myself before I hit the go live button. I don't know if that is helpful to you at all. I think if you're not nervous, you're probably not bothered about it. I think if there's a wee butterfly in your tummy, then it means you're taking it seriously. So it's all good.
Yeah, you want to provide something that's of use and worthwhile, worth the people's while.
That's right.
And I suppose there's always that kind of niggle in the background that it's a waste of time.
Exactly that. I think that you do the best that you can, but sometimes the best that you do isn't good enough for everybody all the time. And sometimes it's not even good enough for yourself. But
I know.
It's nice to be here with you tonight.
It's good to have you on. Obviously, first time doing this. We have met up in the past. Obviously, spent some time at Glasgow Whisky Festival, however fleeting it was. Obviously, you're a busy man and a well sought after man at these types of things. But yeah, I thought if no one knows what the Oscars are by now, they're probably living under a rock. But I thought it would probably be best if you put it in your own words what you think the Oscars are and what they aim to achieve, and then we can probably go on from there.
Okay, so you want me just to give an overview?
Yeah.
So the OSWAs are just become a thing. We just say OSWAs, and I assume everybody knows what OSWAs are, right? But it's the online Scotch Whisky Awards, and the reason let's break that down. I think it's a good way to do it. OSWA, so online, because we're going to host it online. We're going to try the very best that we can to represent the online Scotch whisky community. And obviously it was born out of lockdown and COVID and things like that. So we were bringing onliners together. It started off with it was a really to test the format, see if we could make it work. We started out with just YouTube channels in the first year, got together with trusted people to see if we could cobble it together. But since then we've moved outside of that YouTube realm, of course, and we're much more inclusive these days, and we intend to keep that the case going forward. But that's the O. The S for Scotch is obviously the Scotch Whisky Awards, but it's not just to award Scotch whiskies. And we knew from the beginning that was a difficult thing to sell. But what we wanted to do was not be the only online awards. We imagined a future where lots of online grassroots things can grow and be the online bourbon whisky awards, Japanese whisky awards, Irish whisky awards. It's really endless, isn't it, what you could come up with? But we wanted this to be about where our comfort zone was, where our kind of area of experience lay, and that was in Scotch whisky. So Online Scotch, it was the Scotch whisky community we were looking to represent for these awards. Whisky awards should be self-explanatory, but the word award is so, it just is what it is. If you're going to get enough people together to agree on the same thing, to give consensus on something that puts somebody ahead of everyone else, then they deserve an award. And the context is obviously whisky. So that's what it is. It was an idea that Ralfy dreamt up in the dark days of lockdown, and he pitched it to me to see if I could get on board with it. Of course, I was on board with it immediately, but then we spent months and months and months working out how we could use inexpensive, by inexpensive I mean free, free tools in order to put together something that could be as absolutely inclusive as possible. Ralfy does his Whisky of the Year, right? I do my Whisky of the Year. No doubt Whisky Wims, Stuart, you're doing your Whisky of the Year too. It's not what it's about. It's not about Stuart's, Ralphie's or Roy's favourite whisky. It's about us delivering what the community's favourite whiskies are. And then hopefully the producers that are involved, whether they're nominated or not, get this really, really unique feedback data to represent exactly not what's being sold. The industry knows what's being sold. Yeah. They know how much they're selling, right? What we want to feed back to them is what the Scotch whisky enthusiasts, the community, are enjoying. So it started off with 8 categories. It's now 9 categories, right across whisky, in order to try and determine the best in whisky, the best in the whisky from Scotch whisky enthusiast perspective.
Yeah. I've said it before, like I do appreciate obviously I've critiqued it, and I do appreciate the time, the effort that gets put into it. It's something that's, it's obviously came from a positive direction, and with these things, there is always going to be some sort of criticism regardless. When you put yourself online, when you put yourself out there, when you do something new, and the criticism isn't necessarily just for the sake of being negative. I think when you're passionate about something and you critique it, you're also hoping to improve it, because I do think these are a good awards for certain people, and the fact that it is community run in a sense is what makes it better than the other awards that are paid for and that have a gold stamp on them, and you see them on the shelf and you think, yeah, who cares? But my one concern from that side of things and being people led and community led, I understand obviously the contributors getting together, and I believe this year there were 16. I ran this past Stevie, who is my fiance's dad, and he has no idea about the online side. He created an Instagram account and gave up with it because he can't be bothered. So he has no idea about these types of things. And I kind of ran that by him, the initial, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the initial kind of coming together is 16 people choosing the initial whiskies, and then a larger audience of contributors then vote on them. They have 3 votes each, and then it goes to the public. So when I explained that to him, his first issue, and one of my issues would be it feels a little restrained because you've only got 16 people putting towards the first initial categories or the initial nominations. Whereas, do you think it would be, and I mean, it would be a lot more effort, I wouldn't want to put it on myself, but do you think it would be a little more community run if it was actually the public first, the public voting first and putting towards the categories?
Excellent. Thanks, Stevie. So what I'll say is don't feel in any way apologetic, or don't feel you need to cage the fact that you're critiquing it and asking questions about it. It's your job. It's what you do online, whether it's a bottle of whiskey or whether it's a scheme or something that revolves around whiskey. It's what you want to do. And until your answers are satisfied, you need to keep asking the questions. Better than other awards? I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the case. It's definitely different. As far as I'm aware, I haven't been able to find a similar model to compare it. and actually I've been outside of Whisky to try and find a similar model, but I still can't find it. But other awards are built differently. Other awards have different models, different ways of funding, that kind of thing. I wouldn't say better, but it's definitely different. Moving on to your question itself, you're right. Every year, it's not every year, because the first year everybody was involved in curating all the nominations. Everybody that was involved, we all got together, and it was a mess. It wasn't a mess, but the number was small enough. It was 24 people in the first year. So the number was small enough to just about manage. Then we moved it out into where we changed it so that there was a core set of contributors to make that number manageable. But then we had a second stage that we could do what we actually wanted to do with the OSWAs and make it as inclusive as it could possibly be. Whether you had a YouTube channel, you had an Instagram account. If your Instagram account, it's not just for social accounts, but if your Instagram account is involved in reviewing, recommending, and guiding people in Scotch whisky, then that's valid. You know, the platform that you share your information is incidental. It doesn't matter if it's YouTube or where it is. We were able to move out into retail space and into on-trade space things as well, and involve much more people in YouTube channels, doing it with that way, breaking it down into a two-step process. And we knew at the time, Stuart, that people would see that as a choke point and a control point, in a way that we would control who was going to suggest the nominations for the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. We knew that people would see that. They're absolutely right. Of course we're doing that. What is your point? What's the point of me doing what I do on YouTube? Having all these whiskies behind me, you doing what you do with your gantry of whiskies behind you when you do the Whisky Whims content. Anybody that's involved to step up, whether it's in their spare room or whether it's writing a blog or whatever it is, in order to share their opinion about whiskey, they're given guidance in whiskey. So they either do that by putting forward their nominations up to their peers and say, I'd like to nominate this. What do you think about this? Is this a worthy nomination? And putting it through that process, rather than just us hosting a model that just threw it out to the public. Because if we threw it out to the public, what we would actually measure, only thing we could measure, is what's popular. You know the famous story of David Attenborough's boat, right? Boaty McBoatface?
Yes.
Right, so they decided, let's let the public name this ship. And one of the nominations was Boaty McBoatface. And you and I are Scots. We know as soon as we see that, the only thing we are voting for is Boaty McBoatface, right?
Of course.
Right, so it's not the right thing that wins. It's just the fun thing. It's the populist thing. It's the thing that's most popular. So we don't want the OSWAs to be something that measures what's popular. We want it to be something that measures what's popular and good.
Yeah.
So we still need my suggestions, Stuart's suggestions, Ralfy's suggestions, whoever suggestions it's going to be to offer a nomination still has to go through a peer-reviewed pool before it goes out to a second peer-reviewed pool before it goes out to the public. That's how we take all the potential nominations and whittle it down into the 6 that you see. I'm actually, as long as I can control my screen without sharing email addresses and things tonight, I'm willing to just go straight into the back end and show you that and share it with you tonight. So there's the important thing is here tonight is not about justifying the OSWAs or anything. Because the model is the model and we've found a way to make it work. It just is what it is now. So it's more about letting people see it, and you know, they can judge whether it's something they want to get on board with. But when there's nothing to hide, Stuart, it's dead easy. It's dead easy. So just ask about anything. But that's why we did that. So hopefully that makes Stevie understand that if we just made it a public thing, what would be the point of us? Me and you and everything that we do every day, every weekend about whiskey. We're actively guiding people. We need to take our place and say, no, these are the whiskies we put forward. But we don't get our way. When you saw that, the point that you entered the process this year, did you see anybody's name next to any of the nominations put forward?
No.
You had no idea who'd put forward
No,
what?
absolutely not. No.
Of course, because you just have to vote based on what was blind.
Yes. This
Did
is
you see a correlation? Sorry, did you see a correlation with what came out and what you were voting on? You remember seeing all of those in there?
So I don't know if you can see this. So this is what I technically saw. I don't know how well you can see that. I'll need to full screen it because I am blind as a bat.
Brilliant. I can see it clearly.
Yeah. So the best value for 2023, there was 30 possible selections for me to choose from, with them being 3 selections from each one. But you couldn't vote for duplicates, which is fine. So I've narrowed that down into 23 selections technically, because you obviously can't vote for duplicates. And then the ones that are highlighted in blue are the ones that were nominated, because obviously blue is the best colour. I mean, correlation wise, there's 4 there that have 2 votes, and 2 that have 1 vote. But then you could say like there's other ones there that have ×2 next to them. But looking at that, when I first went into it and having these 23 options, and there's obviously other ones, so your best blended, which unfortunately is a little lacking.
I can tell you that when you went into that, just if you want to stay on the first, let's use the first one as an example, and then I'll follow you from there. So you're quite right. You had 30 possible selections. You've only got 23 here because there were some duplicates. So let's just take an example. Ardnamurchan AD. That means that you had the ability to vote for Ardnamurchan AD or Ardnamurchan AD or Ardnamurchan AD. What does that mean? That means that if you are going to be voting on what's been nominated, you're not allowed to vote for what you have nominated yourself, because there would be no point going through that process, would there? You had to vote for your peers' nominations. So if you've put forward Ardnamurchan as an example and you see it there, you can't vote for that. You have to choose something else. Unless, imagine you and I, Stuart, both put forward Ardnamurchan AD. The only way to communicate that is for it to be a duplicate. So at least 2 people have put in Ardnamurchan AD. So it's fine for me to vote for one of those entries because someone else has put it forward. That's the other reason that that's good, is it because it shows that it's on the mind of more than one individual. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do a wee screen share? Do you think that would be possible?
You could. I don't know if it'll work. You can give it a try.
Because what we're going to do is we're going to back up with and I'll show you the back end of the system, and I'm going to try and put the screen exactly at a place that I'm not sharing people's emails or anything.
No bother.
But that's ready to go, so I'll give it a try. So this is you're getting quite a scoop here, because this is the back end. And by the way, you can look at any of these categories. I don't mind which one you asked to look at, but up you should be able to bring that in at your whim.
Let me see. Yes. So hopefully there's no details on there.
Right, Magic, you see it now, don't you? So
yeah.
So what's happened here, just to give everybody the context, the OSWAs has gone out to everyone. We've asked everyone to put forward 2 nominations each. You've got now. I don't want to click on.
That's fine. Sorry. So 2 nominations. Is that 2 from the initial core contributors?
The initial core contributors. So let's imagine you were in the core contributor group, Stuart. You would get a form from me saying, here are the 9 categories for the 2023 OSWAs. Please read the description for each category and put forward your 2 best picks. If you don't have a pick, you can put through 0. If you can only come up with 1, put forward 1. But the maximum you can nominate for us all is 2, and that's because we want to diversify it as much as possible. So give everyone 2. But if the first year it was 24 people. In the last couple of years, I don't remember what 2021 was, actually 2022, sorry. But last year it was 18 respondents that we had in the end. That means that we've got up to 36 possible entries for each category, which is starting to get a bit beyond what you want people to scroll through and click as radio buttons, right? It's getting a bit much. So we capped it at that. 18 is a good number to administrate from a direct message, email, conversation point of view, to manage as core contributors. because everybody's got questions. You know, can I do this? Can I do that? How did it? So it's good to keep it at 18 is a good number, and we still can produce up to a minimum of say 18, but up to about 36 nominations to go out to all the peers to be voted on. So what you see on the screen here is the result of that. This is the form that you were sent, Stuart, and you could see, click on the screen. Here you've got Ardnamurchan and Ardnamurchan. So you've got 2 entries for Ardnamurchan. So of course we're going to add those 2 numbers together, 12 and 14. That's obviously was enough for them to get a nomination. 14 people decided that was a worthy nomination. Entail 13 plus 2, 15. Bruichladdich Classic Laddie on 14. Kilkerran 12 on 15. Leitchik 10 on 14 plus 5, 19 for Leitchik 10, very popular. Port Charlotte 10, 13 plus 5, 18 for them. And that's your 6 nominations.
Yeah.
So Ralfy and I, we don't need to touch anything here. It is automatically being decided. And all the other nominations that you can see there, for the first time ever, people get to see what's been nominated. So as you go through, there are oddballs that you might be surprised that fit, like McLean's Nose, a blend, but who's to say it's still a good value whiskey, so it's in there. The Loch Lomans that were put forward this year, the 12s, the Inchwarrens, the 14-year-old, a North Star Taro blend, Tomatin's Legacy, Thompson Brothers SRV. You can see that all the mix that you would have seen originally. Now, what I can do here is, I'm not going to do it live on screen, but if you want me to show it, I can click into, for example, Stuart Whiskey Whims and see exactly what you nominated. And what I can also see down the bottom is that everybody has the ability to put forward suggestions that's been missed. Do you remember having that opportunity?
Yep.
So if you looked at these 30 nominations and said, wait a minute, these guys are crazy. How can they not talk about X? Then imagine that a dozen of you all picked the exact, by the way, this is our most popular category, the best value section, obviously, right? So the numbers are quite high here, but in some categories, only 6, 8, or 10 people with the same idea out of 65, maybe more as we go forward, to have the same idea of something obvious that's been mixed, and suddenly it makes it in. So at every point, we're trying to catch things that we've missed or that's not been spoken about.
So from the last 3 years, has anything been suggested that has made the cut? Because when I first got the, if I just put this back up, when I first got this, well, obviously a different format, and there were 30. My initial thoughts, like I said, being a skeptic, were there's duplicates, and I know you cannot vote for duplicates. As at my level, I couldn't vote for duplicates, and I understand what you're saying about if someone's put 2, one of theirs is Ardnamurchan AD, someone else has put Ardnamurchan AD, then they can technically vote for Ardnamurchan AD as someone else has put it. But when I first seen the list, I thought that the duplicates threw me off. I felt the way it was, the way I've kind of put it here with 23. What was going on in my head is people are going to be more inclined to pick something, and it's just a nature. It's a kind of group think. It's human nature to, when you see say something with 5 votes or 6 votes, if you see it duplicated many times, you're going to be like, oh, that has to be good. And I know we rely on the person and the people being strong enough to overcome these human natures.
Well, I don't think it matters. No. To a certain extent, I think you're right that some people are going to see it and be like, oh my goodness, that 4 duplicates, that must be the one to go for, right? Probably what we've got there is a contributor in the mix that doesn't really have much of a role in guiding people or much of an opinion. I don't think that's the case. However, it's possible that they're going to end up picking a safe bet, let's say. Yeah. So the process is taking care of itself there, because if 5 of us, Stuart, have put forward the exact same nomination independently, quietly from our own little space, the chances are that's a bloody good one, and it's already a strong contender for a nominee. So guiding somebody who's got less of a clue, if they're going to be a little bit of a sheep about it, let's say, rather than say, oh, I can opt out, I'm not going to do this. If they're going to tick something, we want them to tick something that's at least performing quite strongly and be nominated by multiple people. That said, remember what we're trying to do here is to keep integrity forward. So let's imagine that Stuart and Roy and Ralfy all get approached and offered some free whiskey, you know, or some food vouchers to eat in a nice restaurant, or whatever the hospitality bribe that something is. That has never ever happened. Not only has it never happened, it's never even been offered. It's never been offered. We do this quietly in the background. Nobody knows when it's starting until it's finally announced. By that time, it's already too late. They don't know who the core contributors are going to be. They don't know who to approach. So it's not even a consideration. Yeah. But we want to make it bulletproof. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I believe it's, obviously you want it to be bulletproof and integrity driven. And obviously I've spoke about samples in the past, and I do believe that you have engaged in a way to overcome that. And I do. You've explained it to me, and it does make sense. But do you think there's still a chance for some sort of bias, whether it's unintentional or not, to come through in these awards?
Absolutely. I mean, it's what we're talking about is whiskey, right? It's a subjective thing, and it's very emotionally charged. It's something that really does connect with all of our kind of primary and primal senses, right? And but it is one of the few things that we can disagree about. You know, something that you really love, Stuart, I might just not see, and vice versa.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And one of the great things about whiskey is we can actually sit and talk about that, whereas we talk about so many topics in our life, we can't. We often we don't find a way to agree and walk away from. That said, whiskey remains a really kind of emotional thing. We're having a few drams and we're watching these things play out in front of our eyes, and it stimulates an emotional response in us too, either because we agree with it and we're cheering it, or we disagree with it and we're criticizing it. It's all fine. There is absolutely bias involved in this. And everything that we touch in whiskey, there's a risk of bias being involved in it. If there's a way for us to kind of move towards the objective end of the bandwidth, we'll do it. But I am still at a loss as to how to do that in a fair and balanced way.
It's a difficult one.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it's a difficult one because I don't know if Dougie Crystal spoke to you, but I approached Dougie Crystal at the Glasgow Whisky Festival, and I love the guy. He's a genuine guy, really nice, down to earth, and I've spent some time with him previously at the Fife Whisky Festival and that.
Do we need that screenshot up for this chat?
Oh no, if I got
that. I want to hear this. I don't know anything about that.
No, so I approached him, and I did have a few at the Glasgow Whisky Festival, and I was speaking to him. And one of my, I wouldn't say it is a little bit of a concern or a little bit of a cloudiness, and I'm on the fence. So Ardnamurchan, for example, and I spoke to Dougie about this. So Ardnamurchan, we're talking about bias and trying to avoid it, and it's near impossible. But Ardnamurchan, for example, on Dramface, let me just see, it's been reviewed, apart from the most recent one, because he did touch upon it. There was 6 reviews from what I could see from this year, 4 8s, 1 10, and 1 7. Now, I'm not saying that Ardnamurchan doesn't deserve it, but when yourself is tied to 2 bottles, and I'm not sure how that came about. I still think it's. I mean, I would jump at the chance, of course. Everybody would. It's brilliant to have some sort of relation or link to a bottle that's got your emblem or your name on it. It's great. Yourself, Ralfy, both released Ardnamurchan things, and I'm not saying that it has influenced the OSWAs, but it might have. Like I've said, there's a groupthink that's easily jumped upon, especially when, for example, Dramface reviewing, and Dougie is a self-proclaimed Ardnamurchan fan, and I love it because you have to, like, if you've got a distillery you love it. There's no issue with that. But when someone who is a fan, who's reviewing it constantly, the people are digesting this, it's getting talked about on a channel, there's maybe, and it's maybe something that's unintentional and for good reasons, because Ardnamurchan do supply some good drams. But that concerns me in a sense when you see that, especially from the outside. There seems like, I know it's probably not happening, but there seems to be some, yeah, like influence there. That's what I would say from looking on the
Yeah,
outside.
I mean, there's heavy influence there. There really is. And the way that we are being influenced is by a brand new distillery bringing bloody good whiskey. Let me start at the start. Here's the thing, right? Dramface is Dramface. I'm happy to talk about Dramface, no problem. Maybe we'll have a future session together where you can come on and you want to talk about Dramface or something like that. That's great. The OSWAs are the OSWAs, and it's quite separate. And Aqvavitae is very separate too. Now, I would like to ask you to be able to parse those three things out and keep them separate, but for the context of your question, it's perfect to throw them all together because the brandings are very different. So you won't see Roy or Aqvavitae on Dramface, even though I'm behind Dramface, okay? You won't see that there because I keep it separate from my own channel. You'll see me face forward on my channel. And in the OSWAs, I'm just one of the hosts. And obviously doing the background, grinding, all that kind of stuff with a wee team, Ralfy, Rob, and Chuck. We're all kind of pitching in to do it together. Three very separate entities, but in the context of what you're saying, you're talking about, this big picture view from somebody looking from the outside. Ralfy's got his Ardnamurchan release in 2023, and Roy's got his Ardnamurchan release in 2023. Look at Dramface reviewing Ardnamurchan, heavily reviewing Ardnamurchan through the mouthpiece, mostly of Doogie Crystal. So what I need to do is do my very best to parse it out so it's one at a time, and then we can talk about the optics beyond that. Doogie Crystal, I'm amazed that you know who Doogie Crystal is, because not many people do. Those who do. And what Doogie is able to share with us is a rare thing. Up until very recently, it wasn't a thing that you could easily connect with somebody starting out and being crazy in their whiskey journey and latching on to every new shiny thing that they could. Fast tracking their whiskey experience in a way that he was willing to sit down and blow by blow, share it all article by article. And because he's got a connection with Ardnamurchan up there and he takes his family holidays every year next to Ardnamurchan, it was accessible to him. He started to get into it quite early and he got his teeth and claws into it. And as he likes to say, his face accepts Ardnamurchan currency like nothing else, right? So his colourful, fun, humorous, pragmatic writing is very, very positive towards wanting to accept more of that Ardnamurchan currency. And we let that play out on Dramface almost unedited. The only editing that goes on Dramface is professional editing. We don't edit people's opinions or scores or that kind of thing. So he can say what he wants to say and we get to hopefully vicariously enjoy his whiskey journey through his words. He will continue to love Ardnamurchan forevermore. But probably he's going to find other things to talk and write about because he's going to have mined that seam until it's dry and need to move on quite quickly. But that's what's happening with Doogie Crystal, and that's what Dramface is able to host there. In the past, he's also reached out to other people to do contributing articles, so he's getting more than one opinion on it. So even when he's gushing about something, there's somebody else's take on it in there as well, which is completely independent. And you just do the best you can. Me as Aqvavitae on YouTube is a separate thing altogether. I wasn't ready to buy into the whole Ardnamurchan thing until I tasted my first bottle. It's actually here. Almost preempted this. This is the 09-2001 bottle I have here, Stuart, in front of me. The first ever release that they had, the core release that they had. They brought their inaugural release out at £45. That's unheard of. I'm already in. That's good. I like that. That's kind of almost another wee tick of integrity for me. That's nice. I buy the bottle. I try it. I'm not on my backside. How can a whiskey this young taste everything like Talisker should have been tasting for the last 10 or 15 years? So I'm on board. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I love Ardnamurchan. I go up there to do a live stream from then. I get to know the team. My goodness, I love them even more. You get to taste more whiskies. So you're just excited about whiskey's future through the optics of Ardnamurchan's lens. fantastic. Every time I talk about Ardnamurchan on the YouTube, on my channel, I suddenly feel this really uncomfortable need to caveat it. And that's not fair. Because what the OSWAs is actually showing us is not another layer on top of that fandom hype. It is betraying consensus. So consensus is different from hype. Hype is when you artificially inflate something, and consensus is when you are in a room and the majority of the room, or a significant proportion of the room, feel the same way about something. If we were to then find ways to mute or diminish that, we would be corrupting the OSWAs, but in the opposite way from the way you're thinking.
Yeah.
So we just need to let it play out. We just need to let it play out. There is no doubt that there's a risk of an echo chamber happening in any digital online environment, any environment in real life too. A whiskey club can end up liking the same stuff, and there's a real risk of echo chamber. But we're trying really hard to diversify the voices in the OSWAs as much as possible. And I put it to you, Stuart, at Whiskey Whims. What is more important to you? To say the same thing as another YouTube channel and repeat what they say and love, or to have your own individual hot take? What's more important?
What's more important to me is staying true to what I actually enjoy. If I like something and then I return to it and it starts to disappoint me, then I will comment on that. Like verse, if something I haven't enjoyed initially and then I get through the bottle and enjoy it more, then I will comment on that as well. I don't think it's good to go against the grain for the sake of going against the grain. I've spoken, been outspoken about Ardnamurchan. There's been a few cast strengths I've really enjoyed, but there's been a lot of stinkers as well, I feel. And that's just the way I feel whiskey is. Like, not every distillery, even Springbank, has terrible whiskey. And people might hate me for saying that, but there are some Springbanks that just aren't great. And that's
no,
just
that aren't
subjectively.
Stuart.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, exactly. Subjectively. But I think it's difficult to not tie Aqvavitae channel and Dramface with OSWAs, because the majority of the voters, the majority of the viewers will probably be channeling into the other media outlets as well. But to be honest, it's something I've contemplated for a long time. I don't think there's a way really around it, because if you like a whiskey,
help us spread
the
news, help us diversify the audience and make it more representative of the online Scotch whiskey community, that rather than just the audience of any one or two channels. I have to say that, you know what it's like, Stuart. You know, let's use a round number, 1,000, right? You have 1,000 subscribers. You're probably only going to get between 5 and 20% of them watching your videos when they drop, right? If it's a really good video, you'll maybe get them coming back again. So if you're getting 200, 300, 400 views out of it, that's a really good engagement. That's amazing, right? Then the 200 or 300 people that watch each video, you use the same rule again. Only 5 to 10 to 20% of them maximum are going to take the time to comment, to like, to share the video, or to step up and support you financially as a patron or whatever. So we know, looking at the scale of the audience, that if we leave it to me and Ralfy and our audience, it's going to be clipped. We need to encourage everybody to share the concept, and hopefully they can get beyond the fact that they don't really like Roy or Ralfy, but they believe in the concept behind it and get behind this thing and make it much, much more valid. Because at the end of the day, we know that we have all our own individual wee biases, and we certainly have our own individual pool of audience. But my channel, I've got 20 odd thousand subs. A really popular VPub, after some weeks, might hit 8K or 9K views. Okay? I suspect that that's broken up into, because it's a bloody long VPub session, 2 or 3 hours, right? So maybe each individual viewer is maybe giving me 2 or 3 views, let's say, as a guess. We don't really know this, but so if you break it down and look at the amount of people I'm left with after the people that will actually step up and take an action, we're down in the low hundreds. I can measure that. 4,500 people registered for the OSWAs to cast 45,000 votes. There is no way I cannot energize that scale of community on my own. It's not possible. That means I'm tapping into Ralfy's, Ralfy's tapping into mine. That means that Whisky in the Six in Canada has been tapped into. The Scotch test dummies are being tapped into. First fill whiskey in New Zealand's been tapped into. G whiskey in Taiwan's been tapped into. And you notice the OSWAs, the contributors, we're also going to Chinese speaking channels. We're going to Portuguese speaking channels in Brazil. We're going to Spanish speaking channels across South America and Spain. We're going to German speaking channels in Germany. And the more we can get those hubs, let's say, to spread the word where they are, the more people we can get involved. And with the model I'm describing to you now, that we can accommodate that, Stuart, to make it as diverse as possible, because I do believe that you're right. There is a bias, and the only way you can work against it is to dilute it by making it less impactful, by getting more opinion on board. What's the downside to that? The downside is that what we actually measure in the OSWAs is what is being popular across the globe. Because the Thompson Brothers stuff, for example, would get spoken about much less. But I'm sorry, that's just something we have to deal with. We need to go with that. It's going to be very unlikely for the Thompson Brothers to continue to succeed going forward on a global scale. But what the OSWAs will do, even if when it is at a global scale, is it will still differentiate what's being sold by what's being enjoyed, because we'll try hard to tap into just the online Scotch whisky drinking community, people with a bit of experience, people that know their way around a glass of whisky, in order to put the whiskies forward in the first place, and also hopefully encourage people to step forward and vote.
So it is interesting that you've touched on that, and I think it's a good point. Do you think, just listening to that, and this is not, I haven't thought about this previously until you brought that up, but do you think it was maybe too ambitious to do a kind of, almost like a world online Scotch Whisky Awards? Because initially I would feel if you'd done the UK, you might get completely different results, because one of the nominations that really surprised me was the what was it, the 21-year-old Dewar's blend, which was £120, which was completely out of sync with the rest of the blends. And
until you discover that in North America and Canada, right, it's a bargain over there, right?
Which I couldn't believe.
Yeah.
So that's something that maybe, I mean, it's in the past now, but maybe do you think initially it was a bit ambitious trying to spread that far, or even at this stage try to spread that far?
So I think what you've picked up quite rightly upon is something that's a little bit cliquey, a little bit regional, and something that was able to manifest in the OSWAs because of that. I am guessing, you're guessing, but honestly, I think we're guessing pretty close to the truth. The reason that Dewar's Double Double made it through, it was in a very, very low interactive category, blends. It's not the most, you know yourself, Stuart, if you put out a blend video on Whiskey Wim's channel, you're probably going to get a lot less interaction than if you'd put in a single malt or whatever video, okay? We know that blends are not popular for our audience, but it remains huge for Scotch whisky as a category. To not represent it would be clumsy, I think.
Definitely.
So we need to represent blends, especially in the last year to 2 years. We've seen blends starting to get talked about and a bit of traction. So it's getting a wee bit exciting there. So we need to put the category in there, even although we know fully that our immediate community might have a lower interaction with it. So it means that it would only take half a dozen Canadian, North American channels who are able to buy that Dewar's Double Double edition for a fairly cheap price to put it forward. However, Roy and Stuart, wait a minute, I can buy Dewar's Double Double 21 for, I don't know, we said 120, I think the price is at the time. I've seen it cheaper since. We've got to be careful. Some of them seem to be half bottles, so when you see a cheap price, don't jump in and buy it because they're weird bottles. Look for the 700, 750 ml, I suppose, bottles. If you and I were to see that at a cheap price, I think the OSWAs have potentially encouraged you and I to jump in and pick it up. And I trust my peers in Canada and North America that they've put forward something that is probably bloody tasty for the price. I
Yeah.
think that the OSWAs has done its job. If we try to retract the OSWAs into Scots drinking Scotch whisky, I think it's broken from the start. Scotch does not see borders. It should not see borders. Everyone should be able to participate in the Scotch whisky space, and that includes buying, drinking, sharing, talking about, writing about, doing videos about, participating in any way that they want, regardless of where they live, how they eat, how they pray, how they look, what language they speak. I don't care. If they're involved in guiding whisky, they should be involved in a scheme, a grassroots scheme like the OSWAs. There are extra dynamics that brings in. Like we say, regional availability is huge. A cask of whiskey only goes so far, Stuart, right? And I think that's just something that we're going to have to deal with. Like I say, the more we build it, the more that we can reinforce the quality of the participation, let's say, I think the more that'll be diluted. The more that'll affect things less. I would challenge you to find a single winner that was affected in such a way, though. But you make a good point.
I mean, yeah, I don't disagree. My motto has been from pretty much the start, whiskey for everyone. I think everybody should drink whiskey, obviously within the legal age.
You and I both think that, yes.
Yeah, but I think that does raise the issue when you try to expand upon the borders, that it doesn't necessarily apply to the people within that area. Whereas I don't know if this would be a future hope or dream for the OSWAs if it was to expand to, let's say, the Americas. They had their own, still under this OSWAs umbrella, UK and Europe, or UK itself, Europe, and then Asia, because then at least that'll apply to the people. Yeah, we might be missing something that our counterparts are getting, but at least then that applies to the person in that area that's watching it and that can buy that whiskey. Because, like I said,
yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. What we are then trying to do is pander to each individual rather than speak to the crowd, speak to the community, right? And we can't really do that. We don't want to do a bourbon awards. We don't want to do an American whiskey awards. We don't want to do a Canadian whiskey awards, Irish, Japanese, or anything. We want to focus on Scotch. But let me ask you this question. By asking a question is probably the best way to answer this. You and I are on YouTube together, right? We know that our content does not recognize a border. And if it does, it's an artificial wall that's been put in by somebody somewhere through political issues. But generally speaking, our content, do you ever look at the stats on YouTube and be quite amazed how many people from Nepal are watching your content, just as a wee example, or Tanzania?
I don't dive into it that much.
Everywhere. We assume that people in these spaces are drinking the local drinks, whatever they make, but they're not. The Scotch is a global product available to everyone. And as soon as we start trying to exclude territories from our scheme, I think I'm going to pass the admin of the OSWAs over to you, Stuart, if that's the way you want to play it, because it's
it's not about exclusion. I think as
soon as you do that, as soon as you say, no, we are these Scotch Whisky Awards, and that one over there is the other Scotch Whisky Awards, absolutely, you're putting up a border where there shouldn't be a border. You're putting up a barrier where there shouldn't be a barrier, and you immediately pull yourself into the mire of rules and regulation and what's right and wrong, and you're much, much more confusing. By the way, I still think it's a valid question to ask.
Fine. Yes. Okay. I think we'll settle on that one. So another question I had, and a question I put out, I don't know if I told you, I put out to Instagram a little kind of question to see if people had questions, and I'm urging anybody in the audience at the moment, if they have questions, and I'll try and look at them and we can ask them. But one of the questions was how involved is Ralfy in the whole process of kind of putting it together? Does he does he get his hands dirty? I feel like that was something that for some reason some people were interested in. I don't know why, but
Aye, Ralfy, I've lost you, buddy. I'm trying to find the window there as I was bringing. Ralfy's the gaffer, right? That's that. I refer to him as El Jefe, right? The gaffer.
Don.
Aye, and he's just like he knows, he's got the vision of what he wants to do and what he wants to achieve. But we know that Ralfy is not. He's very good around his camera. He knows how to drive his wee camera, right? He's actually got a really nice camera, but he knows how to do that, and he knows how to set things up the way with Ralfy. But Ralfy, he's not tech savvy. He's not interested in learning how to edit videos and put together professional productions. It's not his stick. It's never been his stick. And actually, if he did learn to do it and changed the way he was now, I think he would lose some of the charm that he's built up since 2009. We know what Ralfy's like. So he knows what his vision is, but he doesn't know how to get there. So the two of us will sit and we'll say, well, we want to do this. We want to come up with that. How do we get there? I've already done some work, or I'll just make some suggestions, and that's fine for him. He is the one who signs off. Nothing has been done. Okay, that's not true. No significant step has been taken in the OSWAs without Ralfy seeing it, understanding it, and endorsing it first. Ralfy is belligerently stubborn about free stuff, about outside interference. It's been only in recent years, and you can probably testify to this, that Ralfy's been comfortable about collaborating freely. That's a new thing for Ralfy, right? And he had to take it, he had to feel like it was not going to dilute or change what he was doing. For him to put his head above the parapet with the OSWAs forced him into a space where he was going to be collaborating with anybody who wanted to get involved in a meaningful way, which is not comfortable for him. So you can guarantee Ralfy's hands are very dirty. Let's be honest, I don't want to shoulder all the responsibility myself. I need somebody else to blame when things go wrong. So, aye.
There's obviously it is a lot of effort, and we've spoke about this before, and I'm not even joking when I say this. I was concerned when I spoke to you about it, and I think we did kind of clear it up. You were saying about sleeping and stuff. Do you feel like it is? I don't want to ask this because it sounds horrible. Do you feel like it's worth it? Do you feel like the effort that you put in? Because you obviously put a lot of effort in, and I'm not trying to bum you up because you're on the channel, but I know that you do put a lot of effort in, a lot of time into it.
We're being candid here. We're being candid. Can I be honest? And I will be honest. So I'm sitting here and I'm grinding away on putting together all the dull admin stuff that happens behind the scenes, and it's all right because you can sleep when you're dead. I've got a job now where I'm able to nap and things, and I find ways to recharge. But there's this period of the year that's really, really stressful, really intense and difficult because the channel is still my focus. Dramface is important to me, super important to me. Daily not daily, but almost daily content, 4 or 5 articles a week, every week at least. And I always feel neglectful when I'm not able to focus on that fully. And then the OSWAs come along, kick off in August, and that's it until November. And at times it gets really, really intense. But I've built up a team of folk who understand it, who I'm happy to give the keys to. They can go ahead and do whatever they need to do. I'm obviously talking about Rob. I'm obviously talking about Chuck and looking after socials. Rob's our kind of tech guy. And then Ralfy and I doing concepts and crunching and that kind of thing. When it's at its most intense, the worst thing you can do is click on a video of 2 people freely critiquing, as is your right, Stuart, as is your right, and asking questions and asking questions and asking questions. Because what you're waiting for, you want them to say, okay, and offer an alternative, offer a better idea, or offer something. And my experience is that with very few exceptions, that doesn't happen. So there are dark days during the really busy period that you need to have really thick skin. And you need to be able just to look at that and say, right, okay, I'll deal with that in a bit. And I just put a comment in saying, I'm here. I'll do what you need me to do, but I can't do it now. I've got other wee fires to fight first. And then now when you and I are sitting here with a dram, and I'm sorry that you're not feeling very well and things, but we're sitting here with a dram, the job is done. We can talk about it in a much more relaxed way, and I can look back and I can decide, is it worth it? People coming up to me at the festival, people sending emails, reading the comments, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think if they actually knew how honest it was, the fact that Ralfy and I pay for it all ourselves, if they could really see that, to know that it was unequivocally the truth, I think even more people would be like, this is unique. This is precious. We need to nurture this stuff, because as consumers, we are actively taking a louder voice. So, Stuart, buddy, honestly, it is worth it. It is absolutely worth it. And if Stuart Whiskey Whims is involved in 2024, it'll be even more worth it. I suspect I'm going to need to bring you here and literally let you free on the computer.
You're just going to have to give me some drams. You're going to have to let me into that.
All right, so that is
the bottles behind you.
Right, okay, send Stuart some drams. I thought that's what it is. Exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do. But okay.
No, I'm drowning in the samples. Just send me them all.
Right.
No, it's good. It's good. I'm glad you feel it's worth it, and I'm glad that the effort at the end for you pays off. And
also,
I always feel
the Glasgow Whisky Festival, as a caveat, that was only a week after it finished. And then immediately after the Oswars, I've got the festival weekend to plan for. So you would have seen me at my most threadbare. So apologies if I came across as being a bit tired or crab.
Do you feel you spread yourself thin with? And this is slightly straying away from the Oswars, so sorry for asking. But do you feel yourself spreading thin from obviously departing? I don't know. Most people know, like, departing your job to do this full time. Do you feel that it takes a toll on you, that sense that there's a bit more added pressure to do it? Or because there's times when I'm doing this and I feel, I don't need to do this. I do it because I enjoy it. But I'd feel there's always that saying that you do something you love, get paid to do something you love, and you'll never work a day in your life or whatever. But sometimes it could bring that added pressure of not belittling it, but almost making you detest it in a sense, because you're putting that pressure on yourself and you're having to do these things. Do you ever feel that?
Right. Okay. Yes. When I was in my, and tongue in cheek, we'll call it my real job. All right. I felt under pressure. I felt stressed and threadbare. And the role that I had would be quite quiet for a long time, kind of holding pattern, and then super, super intense, and then go quiet again and things, which is probably not the healthiest way to live and be, but I enjoyed it. It's a job I feel privileged to have had. Just for context, for anybody that's watching that doesn't understand, I went self-employed for that company after working for them for 20 years, and I got almost 18 months out of them self-employed before COVID came along and wiped out everything I could do for them. But between you and I think you will understand this, Stuart, is that back in the early days when I started off not just enjoying whiskey and consuming whiskey and sharing it with close friends and family, but actually going out there and speaking much more loudly about it on online platforms and YouTube specifically, I had this dream, this inkling that, wow, could this be real? Could this be a thing? Because even in my darkest days, my most threadbare days, as we talk about, is the most kind of grinding it out days, I still am fully aware that I've found a job for myself, despite what happened to me during COVID, in whiskey. It's almost like somebody else had the strings, the puppet strings, and I'm at the end of it, but I'm very, very grateful. It worked out for me, and I just need to be grateful. However, just being grateful doesn't mean that you're going to be able to rock up every time and be buzzed and really enthusiastic and passionate. But whiskey for me is endless. It is so full of energy and possibility and beauty and flavor and community and connect. Everything is just, if you look at the negatives versus all the positives that it has, it's easy for me. Every week I'm able to just find new content for the VPub. I suppose when that dries up, maybe that's a burnout sign and things. Every day that I'm editing Dramface content or building Dramface articles and or speaking to the team that's built up behind there, it's just gorgeous. I want to run out into the street and look at the sky and say, who do I have to thank for this? So to be in the busy times as we talk about during the extreme parts of the OSWAs, let's say, then that's just the adrenaline buzz that I used to have in the old job. But now it's whiskey, something that I really love and I'm passionate about. So what
I think the big guy that you've got to thank is Ralfy.
Well,
I think he paved the way.
Do you know what? Let's not make a joke about that. Here's a guy who started out in his kitchen in 2009 and showed us that you don't need to be a whiskey expert. You just need to have a wee bit of passion, knowledge, willingness to share. Listen, the amount of people that are drinking whiskey today and the amount of YouTube channels that are producing YouTube content and maybe even writing articles and doing all sorts because they've watched Ralfy or they listen to Ralfy, I don't think it's easy to count. So, I don't.
Ralfy.
I do. Ralfy's an inspiration, but I also think that we all have to earn our own stripes, Stuart. We have to do our own thing individually. If there's no a lot of space for Ralfy clones, let's be honest. Everybody brings their own individual take. Aye.
So I'll bring it back to the OSWAs. I appreciate the honesty. Yeah, and it almost does sound evangelistic, if that's your word. It sounds almost like a miracle how it came about. So one of the questions I had was a nomination that got through, and you might be able to link me on this. The only question I had was that it's not best non-malt. I don't know anything about non-malt. It's best, best distillery. So I found it, and I'm sure it was in the list last year and the year before, and I've not really got an issue with it being in the list because I don't know too much about it. The only thing, or the only part that I want to comment on is Loch Lomond. It's had 6 votes for best distillery, and let me just see I'll need to read this verbatim. So, which producers have bought the best experiences in the past year? Many are committed to available and affordable quality, while others chase what market will stand. We celebrate the former, which obviously Loch Lomond can achieve the kind of the availability and affordability. But the best experiences, it threw me off when I seen this, and the only reason it threw me off is because it doesn't do tours, and I don't know. I don't know if I'm focusing on that too much. But one of the things when I think of experiences, yes, I think of tastings. I think of the people behind it, the people that are doing it. I'm pretty sure I put Old Pulteney, and I'm not saying Old Pulteney are the best distillery ever, but for 2023, I went there late 2022, went and visited what they were doing in the community. I believe they've got like a biomass plant that they feed. We went to a local pub. There was this woman in there on herself serving behind the bar, and her house was fueled by this biomass plant, and I think our electricity and gas was only something like 30 quid a month. It was cheap, and obviously in areas that require that. And I found that inspirational, and the tour was great. The guy Daniel, I'll give him a shout out, the tour guide. He was unbelievable. So I put Old Pulteney for the tour, for the reason of the tour, and yeah, I don't think they're badly priced. I've had maybe one or two of their whiskies. It's not a whiskey or distillery that I do buy from a lot, but the thing that stands out for me with Beth's Distillery would be like the tour and the experiences it provides. So that's why I'm confused about Loch Lomond and why people pick that.
Okay.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer that.
I tell you what, the best thing I can do here is I'll do another. You're getting another scoop here. Do you want another scoop?
It's no bother, yeah.
The first thing I'll say is that the wording on each of those individual categories to lead us to harvest the nominations and to refine the votes and eventually go out to the public is wording from me. When I use the word experience, I'm talking about this experience. I'm thinking about anybody in the world, wherever they are in a location, and I'll read out to you here. Do you want to do a screen share or
It's okay. If you want to read it out, I'll trust you.
No, it's all right. Let's do it. I'll do the screen share. So this is us going to the back end now of Best Distillery, and it should match up exactly with what you've brought up on your screen, okay? So here's what I'm writing here. Which producers are bringing the best experiences in 2022? That's a mistake. It should say 2023, of course.
2023.
Many are committed to available and affordable quality, while others chase what the market will stand. I'm talking about value here, a core pillar of the OSWAs. And then we celebrate the former, okay? And here are the votes for Best Distillery. So this is, I appreciate what you're saying to me, Roy. What I've interpreted that word experience as is a visitor experience. And that makes sense, especially as stewards in the central belt of Scotland with so much access to experiences that translate into visitor experiences at the actual distillery. What I'm talking about, and I need to change the wording for the future OSWAs, is not to use that word in that context, because I think there is, as you've quite rightly pointed out, the ability to make it a wee bit ambiguous. Maybe the rest of the words clarify it a bit, me saying many are committed to available and affordable quality, while others chase what the market will stand. We celebrate the former. But you can see here, Best Distilleries, the amount of votes that they got, okay? Ardnamurchan 24, no, 25, 26, actually. Ben Romack never made it through this year, I don't think, on 11, or maybe they just did, I don't know. 14 for Bruichladdich. Glen Scotia gets 13, 16, 18. Loch Lomond gets 20, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Now, if you want, and I won't do it live on screen, but I'll go to another screen and I'll be able to pick out exactly who put forward Loch Lomond. But that is powerful. Why is that powerful? Why did Loch Lomond get even more nominations than Springbank? Well, in 2023, nobody can buy Springbank. Lots of people are excluded from Ardnamurchan, and a lot of the other distilleries mentioned there are a hell of a lot more expensive than Loch Lomond. People are stepping up and noticing how much of an improvement we are seeing from that Southern Highlander, and I suspect that what we're seeing is that word that we used earlier is consensus.
So do you think, yeah, aye, it's maybe just the word and the way I interpret it.
Experience makes it sound like a visitor experience.
Yeah.
That probably needs to be changed, of course, but I'm speaking to the world, and we know the majority of the world can't visit the distillery. It can't be based on tours. It's based on liquid, absolutely.
Yeah. I just wonder if, because even still, without experience, I could still feel that a distillery has to offer, I don't know, I feel like that has to be, because Edradauer, right, I love Edradauer, and I visited it back in, God, 2019 or 2018, and what a place to visit. And that would have been up there. I could have easily voted for that, and I almost had it in my list. And then I took it out because they're not open to the public anymore. They don't provide a tour, a service. And if you're someone who's from Asia, who's from Germany, who's from US, and you come over here, I want to go visit these places, surely. And if you think Loch Lomond, best distillery ever, and you go to it and sorry, we don't accommodate, I would be disheartened, and that's why I feel confused. I would say confused.
Well, what I'd say that, and I kind of feel like I'm defending the industry a wee bit here, but I'll do it anyway because I know it to be true, that distillery visitor experiences are a new phenomenon, right? Okay, they started out in the 1960s to have a proper visitor experience. Yeah, you could knock on doors possibly and get a wee look around before then, but visitor experiences started out in the 60s. A few distilleries, big brands and things got on board quite quickly, but generally speaking, the idea of almost just demanding that a whiskey that you buy should have a visitor experience behind it really does sound entitled. We are in a rare position that most of the distilleries that we can buy that are promoting themselves as their own brand, probably that's the most common thing, they promote themselves as an own brand, so they've got a core range, do have a visitor experience, because that does multiple things. It brings people through the door, it drives sales up, it drives ambassadorship up for the brand, it gets buy-in for the brand, it gets people connected with whiskey generally and specifically their whiskey. It's a good model. In the case of Edradauer, they cannot staff a distillery, they can't find staff, they can't keep staff, they're on their knees. And until loads and loads of affordable staff are back in the Southern Highlands near Pitlochry, I don't see how Edredar can open their doors again. We know that to be true because if you go to a hotel for a meal, if you go to try and book anything, you know that you've got restricted opening hours, you've got restricted kitchen times. All of this is happening right across the country. Staffing in the UK, broken Britain, and all of that kind of thing. It's not going to, I'm not going to get political, but generally it's a huge problem. If you look over at Loch Lomond have a very rare scenario there that they have a malt and a grain distillery on the same site, producing anywhere between 12 and 16 million litres of alcohol. So we're suddenly at the scale of almost grain distillery, but we're not out in the Highlands. We're not in this middle of Speyside like Macallan, lots of green open fields and things. We're in Alexandria. Very, very tight, hunched up close to the river, an old dye works. And every single building, brick building there, is full to the ceiling with maturing whiskey. It is the single one of the most probably dangerous places a pedestrian can visit in Scotland. So they would love to open a visitor centre. There's a wee Antarctics retail village there, and they've even played with the idea of opening a visitor centre in the Antarctics village or having a remote visitor centre for Loch Lomond. But right now, I think they're just focusing on piling the money into developing their whiskey portfolio. So speaking on behalf of them, and apologies if I'm putting words in Loch Lomond's mouth, but that's the way I believe it to be for them. For Edredar, I've spoken about. For so many other distillery visitor centres, especially the new distilleries that are opening up, all of them are opening with distillery, and the majority of them are opening with a visitor centre too. That never used to happen, Stuart. But it's a product of today, and we're very lucky for that to be the case. To demand it, though, the OSWAs will never be... The OSWAs currently don't have a visitor experience category, a tour category, that kind of thing, and it's not on the radar to do it either. So that's
fair enough. I wouldn't agree with the entitled thing. Yeah, it might be entitled for someone, but I do believe, like you say, new distilleries are doing it, everywhere's doing it, and yeah, back in the 60s it might not have been a thing, but it is something that's done now and is quite prevalent, and it's done in the industry. What annoys me about it most is it's not an entitled thing saying I can't visit there. I spoke about it today with the guys in my group. With Falkirk Distillery, for example, they have brought out their inaugural release. The first 100 bottles are going to auction, and the rest are going to online sales. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing because it's online and because it's auction, but what I think they're missing out on is bringing people to the distillery to buy the bottles. So I'd love to go to my local distillery and be able to buy a bottle, and I would also love the tourism side of things, to bring people to that area, build up that area, and rejuvenate it with the distillery. And that's something I believe that these places could maybe do. It brings in a sense of, it brings in money to the area. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't know that about Edredar, that it was predominantly those types of workers. I thought that it was the decision of the current owner. But yeah, I did not know that was the situation, which is a shame because it is a lovely distillery to visit. I'm not sure if you've been, but it's
idyllic. It's a gorgeous place to go, and unfortunately, there are a few distilleries out there where you can go and experience more than just the whiskey that they're making. You know, Glenturret, feather in the cap for them. You go to the Glenturret, you can try almost endless amount of whiskies. It's amazing, and there's a few distilleries that's harnessing that new kind of bigger picture concept. Edredar was doing that from the start, obviously because of the connection with Signatory Vintage. You could go into the visitor shop there, you could buy any Edredar you wanted that they had available, but they had everything else, right? Old Bowmores and Clynelish, and I'm going back to the kind of the rosy.
Yeah, loved it.
But it was a fabulous wee distillery shop to visit and just pick up bottles. It was fabulous. That we don't have that anymore. So I imagine that they would probably quite like to still be selling bottles there and still having people coming through. I also imagine that Falkirk, I don't know anything about Falkirk Distillery from this regard, but I imagine that they would probably quite like that too. But I guarantee the reason that they don't have it, there is a reason for it, and it'll either be permissions, it'll be staff, or it'll be money.
Yeah.
It's as probably as straightforward as that. There will be a reason for it. I just don't want to consider a distillery as not a distillery unless it has a visitor centre. It's just it's
No.
not. It's nice.
But
It's a
when
nice thing.
when I'm comparing, if I was looking at that list, like I said, Old Pulteney, it would never have been on my radar until I visited it. And a lot of these sentiments and sentimental affection comes from visiting the place and being immersed in it. And personally, if I was voting, and maybe that's why Loch Lomond didn't win, possibly. But if I'm voting between a place that I can visit, that I can go, that I can be immersed in, to a place that just provides me whiskey, which obviously is their sole purpose, I don't know. I think I prefer the one where I can have an experience and enjoy myself, take some friends and make some memories. But there's one comment I think that's already been. I did ask the chat. There's one comment that I think's already been touched on. To be honest, can you hear what Roy thinks the value is of people voting on a category that they only know one or two options of? Chances are people will pick the familiar thing, not the best thing. And I think we kind of touched on that.
10 out of 10, Bart Damon. Spot on. Absolutely. That's what will happen. If people, if they only know one or two options, as you say, Bart, they're probably not well played. They probably should just click the skip button and move on. That said, what I need to be very careful of when I say that here, and again, it's wording and how we communicate these things year after year. People are starting to understand the concept better. But if you've got 6 options in the OSWAs category, there's a lot of people saying, well, I can't vote here because I've not tried all of these whiskies. Sorry, the OSWAs are a 2-step thing. The nominations are done. The job is done. We've put 6 nominations out there. So the people recommending good whiskies to you have stepped forward and said, here are your 6 nominees. To me, that's almost as attractive a thing as the awards ceremony itself, the winners at the end. Those 6 nominations really stand up. You mentioned yours Double Double. It kind of made you raise an eyebrow. But I've just said to you, between me, I'm going to be looking for yours Double Double. And if I see it at a good price, I'm probably going to be pretty encouraged to pick it up, because my peers have shouted about that loudly. So there is a really good value proposition in the nominations in themselves as a recommendation. Now, what we say to the public when we open up to the public is, if you can make a meaningful contribution to this, if you can make a meaningful vote, would you buy this yourself? Would you repurchase it again? Would you recommend it to a friend? Then consider giving it a vote. But if you don't feel that way about any of these 6, press skip and move on. And the more we try and hammer home that message year after year after year, the more meaningful it will be. Why do we share the proportion of people in the award ceremony at the end who have chosen not to vote? Because the bigger that number is, the more people have understood the concept. And the more people have been honest about, this is not my category, I'll move on to the next one. That's why we share those stats, to show that it's working.
Yeah, there was the non-malt and even some of the world whiskies I couldn't vote on, because it's just something I don't drink.
Well,
and that's maybe
got 5. You've got 5. We've got 4 or 5 that are popular categories. You've got the best value. You've got best distillery, new distillery to an extent maybe, but probably not really. And obviously the big one at the end, you've got best Scotch whisky. These get big interaction, big numbers, and the ones in between are much smaller because they're less sexy. They're less kind of community. There's less buy-in from the community. Does that mean that we don't include them? No. I think we need to represent Scotch whisky as a landscape and not just pick the stuff that's popular, right? And we know that there's going to be less interaction and less numbers there. That's okay. If the numbers were all the same, if the number of people participating in the value whiskey vote was the same all the way down, I would be suspicious that people are just clicking any old box. The fact that the numbers are different and all over the place shows us that people are getting the message. So hopefully that's the case.
Yeah, I think I do believe that people hopefully well, no, I don't trust people. People are silly sometimes. I think people might be voting.
One of the core foundations of the OSWAs is to lead with trust. We have to lead with trust. It'll never work unless we lead with trust. You know, Stuart, when I reached out to you to say, do you want to get involved in the OSWAs, did I give you any conditions or any rules of engagement?
All right,
or did I just say, do you want to be involved? Sorry?
No, of course not.
No, so you have to lead with trust. If people come back to me and say, Roy, we've discovered that this person involved in the OSWAs, not all their nominations that they're putting forward, we happen to know that they're paid for, then we have something to deal with. But probably we've already spotted it, and probably it's not going to get through the process that I've been describing and sharing with you tonight anyway. So it'd be something that we need to deal with. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to buy into the spirit of the OSWAs, understand what it's all about. They're not going to want the OSWAs to be the thing that calls them out as frauds. They're just going to buy into the grassroots, organic nature of things, and they're going to go best foot forward and really sharpen their pencil and think hard about what was important to them in the year before. I know that you did.
Yeah, I think I do believe that the people who do get samples and freebies or whatever will be filtered out in a sense. There is a comment, Ryan, saying here, he does have an issue with some of the obvious freebie merchants. Can't take them seriously. I don't know.
Well, Ryan offered me a free bottle of whiskey once.
I was going to say, I don't know if that's aimed at the contributors themselves or just in general. But yeah, I think there is an issue with freebies at the moment, and some people maybe not being as honest. But whether I do believe in a sense that will get filtered through the process.
Well, I think what we need to do when we talk about freebies, and just because I've made a wee quip there, and I don't want to make Ryan's a great guy. He's obviously doing great stuff as well. But he was obviously proud of one of his releases, and he really wanted me to try it. And he said, and I said, look, just tell me about it and I'll buy it. And he told me about it. The only place I could find it was Kinnaird Head. They were stocking it, so I bought a bottle from Kinnaird Head, and I'm bloody annoyed because he was right. It was a bloody good wee bottle of whiskey. It's a lovely wee blend. It was the 8 Sons blend. Lovely wee blend.
7 Sons, yeah.
I ended up taking it along and using it as a tasting. That's not him trying to curry favour or to get me to promote or talk about something. He doesn't need it. He's doing very well on his own. He's just excited and he wants to share his whiskey. When I turn up and you and I get together, Stuart, and I've got a wee handful of samples or something, I say, "Oh, you need to try these." That's just pure excitement and part of the dynamics of whiskey and sharing whiskey. When we say freebies in the context of the discussion that we're having tonight, I think what we're talking about is when people want their product talked about, when they want their product reviewed, which is fine, or whether they want to give you something for free in the hope that it's a quid pro quo, they can get something back. There is the Aqvavitae channel. I've chosen for it to be none of that. Dramface, there is space for it, but there's ways to get around it. And the OSWAs, even if I had an opinion, it wouldn't get past Ralfy. There is nothing there's just no way. Fortunately, we're running it on such a low budget right now that it's not even a discussion. There is just no way that anything can get through the OSWAs, through me, through Ralfy, through any individual in that way, because it would have to be multiple people being courted at the same time. Then you would spot it. But also, we don't disclose who the core contributors are until that is closed. That process is already closed. So it would be an obvious thing.
Yeah.
The OSWAs are celebrating what's already popular, what's already loved and celebrated. That's what we're doing at the OSWAs. We're not using it as a platform to promote new things. People will work that out quite quickly, I suppose.
I do. I mean, I see it all the time, like scrolling through Instagram, doom scrolling, and I think there is an issue. I'm not saying necessarily with the OSWAs, because these people aren't always involved in the OSWAs, but there is an issue with freebies, and I know you like to be positive on your channel, and you like to be positive in general about whiskey, but because that's the kind of guy you are. but I think sometimes too much positivity kind of breeds contempt, especially when there's these people getting these samples and not fully disclosing how they feel about them, maybe in a roundabout way. And one question I did have, and honestly, this is not from me,
Sorry,
was
I need to stop
sweet.
you there. I don't
Yes.
accept samples. I don't
Oh no, I
accept
know
free
that.
bottles of whiskey on Aqvavitae, and I don't review free bottles of whiskey on Aqvavitae. If sometimes a free bottle of whiskey has been sent to me in the past, and I've had to contact the producer and say, thank you, but I cannot review this. If you want me to review it in future, why don't you just simply tell me about it? And I'll buy it
Yeah.
myself. That's
Oh,
the way
I'm
it
not.
works.
I'm not arguing that. No, I wasn't. Sorry if
I just
I
want to be
alluded
clear
to
there,
that.
and I'll never be called out on that. And if there's ever been a time that one of these
Yeah.
bottles has come through and I've used it, I'll hopefully always mention that. But I'll never ask anybody. I'll never ask anybody for a free anything. Never.
No, no, I
I'm
wasn't alluding
funded
to that.
by the
Sorry if that
community.
came across that way.
Yeah, yeah.
I wasn't. I really wasn't alluding to that. Because I've been sent. I was sent a McMira a while ago, and I reviewed it, and I felt like I gave it a favourable review, and I took the review down because I felt dirty. I felt like I wasn't being honest with myself. It was an okay whiskey,
Yeah,
but
I
I
think
felt
that's a
like I
shame.
said it.
I think that's a shame because I think you probably were. You probably did give it a favourable review, and I think all it is. Listen, Stuart, not one size fits all. Some people out there, I've got the Patreon support behind me. I can buy my own whiskies now, but not some people out there don't have it, Stuart. And if they're going to take a free bottle of whiskey, I'm going to get to know Stuart, and I'll be able to tell when he genuinely loves a whiskey, regardless of the source he's got it from. Now, that might not be the same for somebody who comes in and doesn't really know Stuart, hasn't built up a trusted relationship with you. But like I say, lead with trust. Buddy, don't overthink it. I don't think it's that deep. I am not knocking anybody, any channel that has to fund their existence. And I'm not talking about buying cameras or buying subscription time on StreamYard or anything like that. I'm talking about the cost of buying whiskey week after week after week in order to generate new, fresh content. It is cripplingly expensive, and we know this.
It's extortionate.
So
it's extortionate.
If somebody sends you a free bottle and you give it a genuinely honest review, and you can say that you've not been swayed in any way by the fact it was free and you're not doing favors to get more free whiskey, then probably what will happen is that they'll either continue to send you whiskey while they're happy, or until you negatively review one and then they take a huff with you, and then it's not really a relationship that you wanted to have anyway. Don't do it. Everybody has to do this. And that's one of the important things about the OSWAs. The core contributors, we will try to find channels who are self-funded. Absolutely, that'll be a priority. But see if we know that some channels out there have taken free bottles from A, B, and C in the past, that does not exclude them from participating in the OSWAs. Because when it comes to the OSWAs, we specifically ask them to put through nominations that they have bought themselves, would buy again, and would recommend to a friend. So we know, and we're leading with trust. We're asking for their honesty, and we'll assume that they've given us honesty. That's the only way you can build these things.
Yeah.
I know maybe I need a wee pessimist devil on my shoulder.
No.
A wee Stuart Whiskey Wims.
It's me. It's
me.
me.
Are you sure about that? But
no, I think it's a good outlook to have on life. It's just a shame that I'm a little bit more skeptical and pessimistic.
Spend a wee bit more time through in Glasgow, buddy. That'll. I don't think that'll change.
There was somebody. In fact, no, I'm not going to. It's
nothing.
No, it's fine.
Say anything you want to say, Stuart. It's fine.
No, it was so there was a person that was involved in the OSWAs in the past, who had been very ads all throughout Instagram and given bottles and given samples. I think they were involved in the OSWAs, and someone completely, like I say, it had nothing to. I did not approach the person. It came to me, and they're like, "Is this person no longer involved?" And they didn't say about you. They said about Ralfy. Is this person no longer involved because Ralfy found out how much they took and how much they were reviewing pretty much very biasedly because of how much they took. But
okay,
without naming, I don't want to just
There's a bandwidth, right? You're going to get Ralfy on one extreme of the bandwidth that will absolutely refuse point blank even a free sample, right? Almost right, the extreme. And then you've got somebody on the other side that has worked out a way to create content based on donations from the industry. Let's put it that way. Donations based on bottles, sample sets, pre-releases, sponsored content, that kind of thing. And on that bandwidth of creating whiskey content, who are you and I to say what's right and wrong? But it all exists. It's all out there. And as time goes on, we're able to determine where on the bandwidth most outlets sit. What's going to happen, Stuart? And I'm going to answer the question that you really want to ask by giving you this right now. The account that you're talking about was already very close to this. But we went to them and led with trust and said, you can get involved in this if you're excited. All we ask is that anything you put forward cannot be stuff that you have accepted as sponsored, partnerships, whatever it is. I would suggest to you that only two things have happened since then. Either Ralfy has said no, Roy has said no, or they have themselves, far more likely, said no. They've taken themselves out because they believe that maybe for their model, the OSWAs is an uncomfortable fit. Maybe they've taken themselves out because they just didn't have enough bottles that they had bought themselves. Or maybe they've taken themselves out just because they're focusing on other things in other areas. And I think that the latter is if I'm right in guessing that the channel that you're talking about, I think the latter is spot on. By the way, if I meet that channel out there, that creator, I am still utterly a fan, a friend, polite, professional, kind. I am not going to judge anybody how they've chosen to earn a living or how they choose to create content.
Look, it doesn't make them a bad person.
That's right. It doesn't. Not one size fits all, Stuart. It can't be.
Yeah, it doesn't make them a bad person. Yeah. So you touched upon like the balance between freebies and bottles bought, and I'm almost certain that this question is going to be a no anyway. But it is what was good and what I appreciated was the pie chart that was released at the end of the OSWAs with the people, how much they've spent, how many bottles they've got.
All right, yeah.
4 contributors, and I know, and I'm almost certain the answer is no anyway, because I didn't get asked that. It wasn't something that was queried of me. But is there a criteria of like you have to have bought this many bottles, or you have to have tried this many bottles, or the answer is probably no anyway, and it's probably a moot point. But
in order to vote, or in order to participate,
in order to be a contributor who's it's a difficult one who's had a rounded palate, who's tried a lot of whiskey, who buys the majority of their whiskey. Is there a kind of percentage of between freebies and bought? Because for me, if I'm watching a reviewer, if I watch 4 of their videos and 2 of them are freebies, say whether that's a bottle or samples, then immediately I'm less likely to keep watching, because how can someone who's only bought half of what they consume have an unbiased approach? And that's just how I would see things.
That's the luxury of an experienced eye. You know, you've been in whiskey a wee while now, and you're able to go in and you're able to, you know, your senses will betray what you feel is legitimate content, what you feel is sponsored content, what you feel is advertising, what you feel is maybe biased or tainted in some way, and you'll just kind of get a feel for things, and you'll pick up what you connect with and you'll disconnect with what you don't. When it comes to contributing to the OSWAs, of course, it's a no, right? What you have to qualify in some way, and the way you qualify for contributing with the OSWAs as a core contributor or as a wider contributor, you have to step forward and say that you have been active in guiding recommendations. Whether you want to call it a whiskey review or not is up to you, but you have to be active in guiding whiskey opinion. Guidance is key here, helping people make good choices when money is tight and whiskey is becoming more expensive, or when money is plentiful and whiskey is cheap, it actually doesn't matter. You're still encouraging people or suggesting that they part with cash for something based on your say-so. That has a lot of responsibility behind it when you actually think about it.
It does.
If you're
So
okay with that, and if you've taken a platform to do that, like Stuart at Whiskey Whims, you've done it for a year and you've been active within the last year, as the other caveats, of course, then you have the ability to put forward your case to say, I could be involved in the OSWAs, and anybody has the ability to do that. I've got a mountain of people and wanting to get involved in the OSWAs, and of course, over the course of the new year, hopefully I'll get a chance to chew through all of those applications. You're lucky, Stuart. You didn't need to apply. I invited you. I don't have the bandwidth or time to go out and invite all the channels that I've forgotten about, all the social media activists that I've forgotten about, all the blog writers I've forgotten about. I can't do it. I need, on the About page, on the homepage, on the contributors page, people can click, 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 click. I want to be involved. I want to be involved. And that's how we need to build the thing. If they're waiting on an invite from me, who knows when it's going to happen? And
no, it's unrealistic, and there's no issue with that. But my issue there would be some sort of vetting process. I know the questions are asked, and then like your kind of what do you call it, mantra tonight is trust, and it's a great thing to have. But when I almost had my whiskey as a year as an Ardnamurchan 22-year-old Barolo cask finish, it was absolutely splendid. I think it was 230 quid a bottle though. I cannot recommend that to people. I can say, like, if you've got that cash, my girlfriend got me for it, sorry, my fiance, and I know that I'm in a fortunate position where I can buy these whiskies. But there's people out there, and I know, and I've commented on it, that will recommend things that they can't necessarily afford themselves or would buy themselves, but will still recommend them, which I can't engage with, because yeah, you might be aiming for a different audience, but if you yourself wouldn't spend that money, and don't get me wrong, if I was looking at that Ardnamurchan myself, I probably wouldn't buy it, because surely that's not worth it. But it was almost worth every penny. It's lovely, and the fact my fiance got me as a gift makes it even better. But yeah, I feel there's people maybe saying that no, there are people that are preaching that this is worth it or this is great, but then they wouldn't buy it themselves, which I can't understand. I can't wrap my head around.
I really don't think that's happening. I mean, so I'm assuming that you consider Ardnamurchan 22-year-old, was you Barolo, you said? Barolo?
Yes, Barolo.
You would consider, so you would look at that and you would consider that that's an amazing whiskey that had your socks blown clean off, but yes, you wouldn't consider it appropriate to put forward in the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. And this is what's key. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
And this is what's key about the awards that people need to learn as the years tick by, because that's probably right. And even if it's not, even if you decide that, my goodness, how much did you say it was? 200 quid? Even if you were to decide, every sip of this is £200 worth of whiskey, it's just nectar, it's gorgeous. You put it forward as a core contributor or as a wider contributor, it's not going to make it through, because not enough people are going to have engaged with that whiskey in order to make it through the nominations process. So it's almost self-cleaning. We're going to see that Ardnamurchan 22-year-old Barolo and go, oh, I've got no experience of that. I can't vote for it. And it's not going to make it through. So it's one of these things. It might just be, we need to understand the concept of the OSWAs. We need to understand its focus, what it's actually trying to do. Between you and I, between everybody that's ever going to watch this, I think the nomination show is every bit as valuable, arguably more valuable than the actual winners ceremony at the end, in terms of value to the community. Because the winners is a celebration. Those 6 nominations that drop in the September time, that's that is curated by 65 different online whiskey commentators to refine it into 6 nominations for each category. One of the things I thought you were going to pick up is the repetitiveness of it. But every year we're going to have 6 nominations for each category. And for anybody coming into the maelstrom of whiskey in 2023 or 2024 is going to be able to look at that and say, that's not a bad start.
I think 6 is fine. My ideal scenario, and it would, like I said, it'd be so much work. And your issue would be the popularity thing, what's hot. But I think that's good for a 2020 whenever award, because what's hot should be hot. But it would be, I would have several different scenarios that whether it would work, you would need to test them, but you've not got the time. It would be the public vote initially on the categories. You either pick the 6 top and then the winner, or the contributors, if the contributors need to be involved, they get blind samples from whomever, completely blind. So many, and there is a cost. Of course, there would be a cost. That is the issue. There'd be a huge cost. The 6 bottles would go out to like maybe 3 of them, and you'd get 3 categories, but that would be unrealistic. But I did want to touch on
there are awards platforms in the past, most notably the Malt Maniacs used to do blind tasting. And I think what killed off that whole scheme, and maybe it's still going, I don't know, but people having to sit and churn through whiskies blind, you know. What we've managed to do is put a model in place that if it's been used properly, I don't need to send out blind samples for whiskies that people have already tried.
Yeah.
We are crowdsourcing opinion. It's not a blind challenge.
No, I agree.
Why would we send out? I mean, I think it's nice if a retailer wanted to get involved in a collaborative way and say, hey, Roy, Ralfy, we're going to put together tasting packs. Do you mind? So carry on. You're a retailer. You can send out what kind of samples you want in any shape you want. If you want to put the logo branding on it, then probably it'd be polite to ask. But yes, you can send this out, not in our name, in your own name, and people can buy OSWA packs and taste them, and they can do it that way if they want. And it's a nice little collaborative side game, if you like. But what we are trying to do is harvest opinion. Hopefully, if the OSWAs are working fairly well, the majority of what's offered is things that people can buy and taste themselves or have already tasted themselves. So sending out blind stuff isn't really a focus.
No, my ideal thing would be just have the public vote, but the effort, and like you say, you might just get what's flavour of the month that year. But I wanted to, Ryan had another comment. Disappointed with the lack of blend votes, and I do agree with this. I've actually started drinking blends more this year, and it's maybe an issue that the community have as a wider community is maybe not enjoying blends as much or just getting into them. Can we see what was voted for initially? So
look at that.
I think I've got the.
So when he says, "Can we see what it's voted for originally?" What do you think Ryan means there?
I don't think he's wanting to see. I think he's wanting to see what the initial blends were. I really don't think he's interested in his own blend. I think he's generally interested in what the selections were. So what I could vote for, what I could put my 3 votes towards. And to be honest, I struggled with this. I think I had Campbelltown Lock. I've never owned a bottle. I've had a couple of drams. I found it nice. The SRV5 wins it all day long. I think that was the winner.
Do you want to talk about blend or blended malt?
What did he say? With the lack of blend votes. Oh, he might have meant just blends. Where's blends?
Number 2.
Oh, good one. Oh, where am I going? There we go. Yeah, he must have meant blended malt. Yeah, I think the 2 that stand out to me is Chivas Regal and the Dewar's Double Double. I mean, the McLean's nose, I enjoyed it. I thought it was okay. Great price. I think it's bland wouldn't be the right word. I just think it's average. I tried it in good spirits, wanting to buy a bottle, and normally when I get to try something in a shop for free, it usually urges me to buy a bottle. But
sure.
the Thompson Bros, there for, unfortunately, that was the only one I could pick. The Adelphi blended Scotch, not really my thing. Like I say, Chivas Regal, I've had it. I don't think it's bad, but I wouldn't buy a bottle. Whereas the only bottle that I've bought out of that and actually spent time with is the Thompson Bros. So that's quite a limited list there. But that just goes to show what people are drinking.
Well, and it doesn't go show what people are drinking. It shows what people are drinking in our community, the Scotch whisky community that we have been able to reach so far. So this is really cool. Thank you, Ryan. What's happening here is a dynamic that we're very aware of, is that the more transparent that you are, the more people demand. So I've shown you behind the scenes for 2 categories tonight if we've spoken about, and then Ryan's like, oh, can we see what's happening with behind the scenes in the blends? Can we see that? Can we see that? Now, can I just say up front, you've prepared your own slides in the background, and you've already told everybody what you had the choice of. So I'm showing you these things. I'm showing you the back end of the poll. It should exactly line up with what you're bringing up, where you've worked independently on your own. But now pull that share screen back up, because it's at the blend section. Stuart, you and I are not going to get our picks. We're not going to get the things that we like. We know that whiskey is subjective. The only thing we can do if we do a good job is hold a mirror up to the community and reflect what they're enjoying. These are the nominations. So out of 65 people involved, at the top here you can see 65, right? We had 54 people put through nominations. So that's decent. That's quite decent. But we only had, we had 22 possible selections with lots of duplication. So there's really, what we're seeing here is a reflection of our community. It's growing, because I can see that with Maclean's Nose taking up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slots, Thompson Brothers taking up 3, we can see Cutty-Sark Prohibition taking up 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 13, much more than half on 3 bottles. That tells me this is ripe for disruption. So we've seen people coming in. We've seen North Star move into this space. We've seen Turntable move into this space. We're seeing disruption in the blend section. This is going to be an interesting thing to watch in the future. So here's the Thompson Brothers blend, the one that went on to win it in the end. 16, 17, so 19 votes for them. Maclean's Nose gets 7, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Dewar's Double Double got 10. Like you and I have already talked about that one. Cutty-Sark Prohibition got 16. Chivas Regal 18 got 9. And Black Bottle got 8. So you can see all we're doing is we're taking a lack of inspiration from our core contributors. They're just not inspired. And that directly reflects that entire category. Who's going to nominate Famous Grouse? Who's going to nominate Bells? Who's going to nominate much of the Johnny Walker output, the Dewar's White Label, the standard blends? It's because it's to our community, I'm sorry, it's dull, 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 and then a little bit more dull. The stuff that's being added in here are actually quite interesting blends, I would argue. So it's down, you could say that, there's a lack of inspiration from the contributors. I think that's correct. But is that because they just don't connect with blends, or that there's just not much in the blend category to inspire us right now, which I think is more likely the truth. I fully predict maybe things like Turntable, North Star, things more along the lines of the Maclean's Nose and the Thompson Brothers TBBSW in the future will inspire more activity there. But what we're doing is offering the industry a really unique feedback set of data. We are just not inspired by the multitude of Scotch whisky, I'm sorry. And that makes sense because it tends to be in the blend sector, it tends to be mass market, high volume, low margin, cheap prices, which I think unfortunately directly affects quality, especially as we want to take more of the malt to drink as single malt. It's not going into blends. So it all has an impact and an effect. And I think that that's what this demonstrates here. Remember, it's only representative of our community. But that's the back end of the slide that you've pulled up there, and it'll match exactly with the things you've highlighted.
I've got 2 more comments, and one of them's one that I was interested to ask myself, but it's been brought up. I'm not sure who Heedcase is, unfortunately. So I'm sorry. I'll just call you Heedcase. Heedcase.
Who's a Heedcase?
I don't know this person. Can you ask Roy if there isn't a case of conflict of interest involving the Scotch test dummies with the indie bottle category when one of them is involved with SMWS America?
Listen, there's a conflict there because Scott, who works for SNWS America, is my pal as well. He's a good pal. I love the man. He's just a good man. Conflicts of interest all over the place. Lead with trust. If Scott came on and nominated Scotch Malt Whisky Society bottles, do you think me and Ralfy wouldn't spot that? If Scott came on and only voted for SMWS or SMWS bottles, do you not think Ralfy and I would spot that? We would spot that.
I want to see Scott's votes now.
And we know,
Okay.
we know. Well, if we show Scott's votes, we need to show Whiskey Wim's votes and everybody else's votes, and that's not what we're about here, right? We're not going to do that. We're not doxing people here. What we're trying to do is build up the reputation and the integrity, the perception of integrity behind the OSWAs. Scott is fully on board with the OSWAs. He loves the idea of the OSWAs. And if SMWS was to succeed, I think he would want to know that it succeeded in a justified way. It's going to be so obvious to look for that. There's no way he would give himself a red face and do that. You wouldn't do that if you worked for SMWS. I wouldn't do it if I worked for SMWS or any other producer. It's structured in a way to encourage people to do the exact opposite of that, and to make it very, very obvious if they do indeed do that.
So the last question before I go on to the conclusion and the future of OSWAs, just from the people, and it's Bart again. He's asking, and I did actually have this raised on Instagram. Someone asked if there was going to be a category. I don't know, it must have been an Irish person because I don't drink Irish whiskey. Someone specifically asked if there was going to be a category for Irish whiskey, because there is such a vast number of distilleries and whiskies to choose from. So he's saying, is there a way that the OSWAs could do more justice to Irish whiskey in general? It just never feels right that they're lumped in the world whiskey category with their provenance.
So there's a couple of things to parse out there, Bart. The first thing is you're clearly a lover of Irish whiskey, and you want to see Irish whiskey get better representation rather than being lumped in a category. I need to go right back to the start of the stream tonight and mention again and highlight again, and people are starting to get this, the online Scotch Whisky Awards. The S is for Scotch. That doesn't mean that we only talk about Scotch whisky, because we're Scotch whisky drinkers, Scotch whisky community, but we do, unless you're Stuart, drink other things like Irish, right? We drink, and honestly, how are you going to know that your Scotch whisky is the best liquid unless you're having dalliances outside of that category? You need to go elsewhere and see what it's like. Ireland is making some truly stellar, cracking whiskies. They honestly deserve their own entire online Irish Whiskey Awards. Irish whiskey, Bart, is not my comfort zone. I'm going to suggest it's not Ralfy's comfort zone. We enjoy it and we review it and we like it, but we review it through the lens of our experiences with Scotch whisky, no doubt. People behind Irish whiskey and the Irish whiskey scene are going to be able to do a much better job for Irish whiskey than we could. We've stepped forward to create an awards scheme in the environment that we're confident in, which is Scotch, but we choose to celebrate all whiskies. I think world whiskies is clumsy. I think non-malt whiskies is clumsy. But until somebody steps forward with an absolutely unequivocal better title or way to phrase it, or a way that's not clumsy, that's what it is. That's what we're dealing with today. The alternative is that we just don't include it. So if we do Irish, then we need to do Japanese, because if you're talking about provenance, you can't talk about Irish and not Japanese, or not bourbon, or and in the modern context, so many categories of whiskey. Where does it end? It's endless. It's not the Online Scotch Whisky Awards anymore. It's just the Any Old Whiskey Awards. So I think there's a space for the Irish community to step up and make their own platform. And we don't want to dabble in that. It's not on the radar for us at all. I hope that answers Bart's question.
I don't know if you can see that there, but he says, well, fair enough, best answer of the night. So to wrap up, because I'm almost getting to the point that I need to pee and I'm going to pee myself. What's your... What do you... Can't hold a bladder. what do you think the future holds for the OSWAs, and what do you hope that it holds essentially? Like, what do you want for it? Where can you see it? Do you think it'll ascend other awards? Do you think there might be some way to monetize it, anything like that, or do you think it will progress in a way where it will stay pretty much solid to itself?
Well, let's start with the monetization thing at the start. It's at a scale right now that it's not a topic. It's not something that Ralfy and I need to worry about. So I need to send Ralfy his invoice for the year. And the invoice is just all the subscriptions. So, you know, the back end, Google, the website, the domain names, anything that we pay money for, you know, the age verification gateway, all of these things, anything that we pay for, Ralfy and I split 50-50. And I think, I'm just pulling a number out the air, but I think 250 quid is how much Ralfy's going to pay this year. So 500 quid is the raw cost of running the OSWAs. So monetizing it is not really a thing. However, what we need to remember, it's not the subscription costs and how much we pay for a domain or website hosting or that kind of stuff. It's buttons, as I'm clearly explaining to you here. 250 quid out of my own money, still a lot, don't get me wrong, but our Patreon support, none of our Patreon support have complained that they're financing that so far. The true cost is the man hours involved in it. If you were to count that up, there's not a monetization model that I can think of that would pay for it. So it has to be done voluntarily for now. As long as we have the will and the passion and the support from everyone, Stuart, to continue doing that, we'll continue doing it. For as long as we can look back, one of your original questions, is it worth it? As long as we can look back on it each year and say, aye, do you know what? In the end, that was worth it. So that's the best way I can answer that for now. In terms of where I see it going and what its purpose and things, I remember coming into Whisky and being very intimidated just by the sheer range and variation of Whisky there was. And I'm going back to 2005. Somebody coming into Whisky in 2023 or 2024 is going to just be knocked on their backside. I don't know how they can pick it up and find a way to start. It's almost intimidating. The only way that we can get past that is to make it as welcoming and as accessible a space as possible for anybody who's curious to come in and enjoy the space. The OSWAs has to take its place in that environment. What I also, between you, me, and we don't talk about it a lot, I hope that the industry can look at the OSWAs and say, here is a data set, here is an opinion, here is feedback that we previously never had. They can contextualize it by looking at the people who are creating the data for them. It's a slim sliver of the Scotch whisky community, let's be honest. But the people who are passionate about it, the people who love it and invest a lot of time in it, they might be tempted to step forward and participate. So as long as they contextualize it as from those people, that's a very interesting data set and very interesting feedback. And I would suggest it holds a mirror up to an entire category and give them important information and feedback. That's what we are trying to achieve, to celebrate the good stuff, to celebrate the producers that are doing it right, to celebrate the ones that deserve to be talked about and celebrated. We've spent an hour and we've spent 2 hours, Stuart, and we haven't even talked about the People's Choice, which I think is one of the most valuable parts. That's what we're trying to do with the OSWAs.
Yeah. If we spoke about that, I would probably pee myself. And that's no word of a lie. And plus, the cold has managed to subside a little bit with the whiskey. I've been drinking my favourite of the two releases when it came out, the Port Cask O'Kerran 8-year-old. I enjoyed this more than the sherry, but I've been told that I'm wrong. Everybody in my whiskey group, everybody in my closest circle tells me I'm wrong. So just goes to show you how subjective whiskey is.
The port every day, all day, twice on a Sunday.
You're saying I'm wrong as well.
No, I would always pick the bourbon cask from the O'Kerran 8s.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's the bourbon's thing is a mood thing for me. I'm open to both of them.
Yes. Well, I've got to say thanks for your time. There was a couple comments just at the end that I think we need to show. So Luna was saying for German whiskey there will be a first online awards in 2024. I think they might have taken a leaf out of the OSWAs book. So that's good to see. And James is saying, great open and frank discussion. Kudos to Roy for being so transparent about the process, and to Stuart for being courageous enough to ask the tough questions. This was very, very enjoyable. So I'm glad that it's brought something, because as I was saying to you earlier, I get nervous. I think people won't care. But hopefully it's made people's Tuesday night a little bit more enjoyable. Hopefully they've had a dram and a little bit of whiskey.
Well, I don't care. I had a nice wee Tuesday night hanging out with you, so I'm all right with it. I'm 3
sure
drams in, and I've almost finished my beer too. Had a good night. But thanks to James, thanks to Bart, thanks to Ryan, thanks to I see Matthew's in, the Whiskey Bond is in, and it's good to have Andrew Butler's here, quite a few. It's good to have folk in.
Yes.
And hopefully, like I say, it's not. I don't think this is what you and Jason did is fine. You sat there, you had your open discussion, but what this is an ability to do, rather than kind of pontificate and chew over things, just ask me, because the chances are we've thought about it. We've thought about it.
No, I think there's an opportunity for both. And like you say, yeah, maybe we should have came to you first and asked, but I think discussing it prior to having the knowledge, maybe you should have the full knowledge. It's still good to summarize and kind of question these things. I mean, there's still, yeah, you're never going to answer everything, regardless. Am I converted? Maybe, but you know, I don't know.
You need more drams. That's what you're saying. Right, listen, I tell you what, I think that the important lesson here is that you and I are in a very privileged position. Every week I get to rock up on the VPub and stand there and criticize brands and producers and just shout my mouth off. I try and keep things positive, as you've pointed out, but I have a platform to say whatever I like because I am independent and I owe nobody anything apart from the community, the people who tune in, my audience. They're the only ones I have a debt to. So, and I get to say my opinion exactly as I want. But I think what it does do is we need to think about these things and say, are we thinking about this rationally? Are we applying any pragmatism? Are we thinking about bigger picture? Or are we just going on our own emotion, our own bias, our cognitive dissonance, our own gut? And I think the answer is, you and I know very, very well, and I'm caught out by it weekly. Whiskey and living and breathing in that space is a very emotional thing. So we end up expressing our emotions. And I might disagree with you, Stuart, on this or on things in the future, but let's raise a glass and celebrate each other's ability to have a space to do it.
Yes, I will raise a glass to that, and I will raise a glass to Ralfy and yourself for first influencing me to start this, really. When I first started watching yourself and Ralfy, it was yourselves that, yeah, pretty much had decided why not. I might as well. If they look that stupid and they're fine with it, I might as well look stupid as well. So cheers to you. Cheers to all that are in the chat. Yes, exactly. Cheers. I'll end the stream and I'll conclude with you. So thank you.
Thank you.